Hello everyone. So in the last video, we completed the epistemology of Charvak school. In this video, we will be starting with the metaphysics. But before going to that, I want to once again show you the syllabus. So as you see, in Charvak school, there were two things, epistemology and rejection of transcendent entities. So now we will be doing this second part of the syllabus. So what do transcendent entities means? So the word transcendent simply means that something which is beyond our sensual experience. That's the simple meaning of transcendent, which is something beyond our sense experience. And in general, if you see, we are organisms of space and time. We live in space and time. So transcendent can also be interpreted as something beyond space and time, something beyond our senses. That's it, right? And so what are the transcendent entities? Then entities like God, like soul, these kind of entities will be the transcendent entities because you cannot experience them through your senses. I mean, in general, at least you cannot experience them through your senses. Hence, these are termed as the transcendent entities. So, Charvaka rejects transcendent entities, and that is what is there in his metaphysics. So, let's start with his metaphysics then. The Charvak admits the existence of four elements earth, water, fire, and air only, and he rejects the fifth element, the ether, because it is not perceived but inferred. Okay, so I think that I have discussed this, that in Indian philosophy, in general, there are five elements which are considered by all the schools. Those are earth, water, fire, air, and ether or akash. So, earth, water, fire, and air, you know that. So, what happens is that there are earth, water, fire, and air at atomic level or very small level, and then there are gross molecules of gross compounds of these as well. So, yeah, I want to make sure you understand the words gross and fine. So, as there are four elements, let's consider the element of earth. So, at the smallest level, there will be an atom. Okay, this is not a technical denotation. I'm just trying to explain it. So, don't write this anyway. I'm just trying to explain what gross and fine means. So, at the very small level of the element earth, there will be something like an atom, and this we cannot perceive because it is very small. It is beyond our senses, not because it does not exist in this time space time, but because it is so small that our normal sense organs will not be able to perceive it. These atoms of the earth element will combine in themselves and will form a gross object composed of element earth. This we can perceive. So by gross and fine, it means only this. Gross is something which can be easily perceived by our senses, whereas fine is something which is so small that it can so small or uh, yeah, fine is the word. How to explain that? Yeah, you can think of it as very small and which is not very easily perceived by our sense organs. So like that, there are four elements: earth, water, fire, and air. The fifth element is ether or akash. Now, ether has two meanings in Indian philosophy. One, in Jainism, it is taken as space, but in other schools like Nyay in Charvak, it is not taken as space. So, what is then it is taken as? So, ether is considered to be the one eternal, all-pervading physical substance which is imperceptible. So, where did they come about this conception of ether? This conception they came about by inference. As you can see here, that ether is imperceptible. If something is imperceptible, then how will you know that? Of course, you will know it by inference. How did they infer the ether? So you know that there is sound, there are sounds, and you can hear sound in air as well. You can hear sound in water as well. Ancient human beings would have been able to hear sound wherever they would have gone, underwater, in air, different geographical locations. So they would have thought that if we can hear sound, there must be some medium through which sound travels. So this medium through which sound travel, they named it as ether. Hence they inferred the existence of ether as the substratum through which sound travels. And why did they consider it to be one, eternal, and all pervading? This might be because you can hear sound in air as well, you can hear sound in water as well, you can hear sound anywhere you go. In present day, we know that you cannot hear sound in vacuum, but during the ancient time, they did not have access to vacuum, and hence they could hear sound wherever they go. And hence they considered that it must be all pervading. All pervading means that it is present everywhere, that it fills all the space, right? Thus, this conception of ether was inferred by Charvak, by different kind of schools. Now, as you have seen in epistemology of Charvak school, that they have rejected inference as a valid source of knowledge. So that is why they are bound to reject. They are bound to reject ether as a medium, because ether existence is inferred only, and hence they cannot take it to be a metaphysical entity in their metaphysics. So the first thing they reject is ether. Then everything which exists, including the mind, is due to particular combination of these four elements. The elements are eternal, but their combinations undergo production and dissolution. So this is their general atomic theory which they have given. Now you will see that they are saying that elements are eternal, but their combinations undergo production and dissolution. Now, how come they know this? This is also beyond perception, right? So this is why the Charvak school is self-refuting, because here also they are making an inference. How could they say that elements are eternal when they cannot perceive a thing for eternity? So there are a lot of contradictions in this school. But okay, let's look at their theory of consciousness. So they say the elements are eternal, but their combinations undergo productions and dissolution. So elements are not created and are not destroyed. They are timeless or eternal. Eternal means that they are not created or destroyed. They are beyond time. But these different kind of elements combine. Of course, there are these four elements, and because of their combination, different kind of compounds will be formed. And this combination undergoes production and dissolution. And consciousness, according to them, so consciousness, we have already discussed in brief that consciousness is our ability to be aware of things. We will be looking at consciousness in some detail in this video only. So for now, consciousness is regarded as a mere product of matter. So I have told you what is the basic, this is the basic position of materialistic metaphysics, that they consider consciousness to be secondary. Matter is what is primary, matter is what is foundational, and it is because of different combination of different elements of matter that consciousness arises. It is produced when elements combine in certain proportion, right? They do not know the proportion, but they are saying that there must be some proportion in which, when matter combines, consciousness arises. It is found always associated with the body and vanishes when the body disintegrates. So this also is based on their epistemology, right? Their epistemology is that whatever they will perceive, they will consider that to be knowledge. And of course, we perceive that whenever we have a body, we have consciousness associated with it. And whenever we die, our body disintegrates, our consciousness also goes away. So this is just based on the perception based epistemology. Now they give some of the metaphors to explain this. So you might be saying that consciousness is something different from matter. At least if you look at it, consciousness and matter seem to be very different. We have discussed already that when a person dies, the body for some time remains before disintegrating, but the consciousness goes away at the very instant. So, such kind of things point towards that consciousness and matter are different. We will look at some more arguments about why consciousness and matter were taken to be different. For now, let's just go ahead with this simple argument. Now, what Charvak school claims that is, it is found always associated with body and vanishes when the body disintegrates. Yeah, the metaphor they give, just as combination of beetle, areca nut, and lime, that is pan, सुपाड़ी और lime का मतलब होता है चूना. Just as these, when they combine, they produce red color. So none of these three things is red, but when you combine them, red color is produced. And similarly, fermented yeast produces the intoxicating quality in the wine, though the ingredients separately do not possess either the red color or the intoxicating quality. Similarly, a particular combination of elements produces consciousness, though the elements separately do not possess it. So this is how they explain how consciousness can be formed through matter only. Consciousness is result of an emergent and dialectical evolution. So consciousness is formed because of different kind of combination of the different elements, and some combination during the course of evolution must have resulted in formation of consciousness. It is an epiphenomena, a byproduct of matter. Epiphenomena means secondary phenomena, right? A byproduct of matter. Given the four elements and their particular combination, consciousness manifests itself in the living body. Matter secretes mind as liver secretes bile. The so-called soul is simply the conscious living body. So okay, they say the so-called soul is simply the conscious living body. Soul, as we have seen, is a metaphysical entity because we cannot directly perceive soul. And hence they are saying the so-called soul, that is, it does not exist in real. What we consider as soul is nothing else but conscious living body. Okay, so here I will like to point out a distinction between consciousness, soul, and mind because they can be a bit confusing to understand, and they might seem to be same as well for a lot of people. So consciousness is what makes us capable of knowing. It is our ability to be aware of our surroundings and our internal state. So this is what consciousness is. Now consciousness must have some seat. Consciousness must be present somewhere. Soul is the seat of consciousness. So soul is the metaphysical entity which contains consciousness. And mind, what is mind? Mind is an organ which intermediates between the material body and senses and soul. So mind is just an organ which takes sense data from your senses and material body and transfers it to soul. So it forms the bridge. It is the interconnection. In almost all the school of philosophy that I have read in this book, mind is considered to be material itself. So mind is also made of matter only. It is only the soul which is immaterial, which is not made of matter and whose essence is consciousness. Yeah, so the so-called soul is simply the conscious living body. There's no transcendent entity like soul, like all other schools of philosophy talk about. Soul is just conscious living body, and we have already seen how consciousness is formed by combination of different elements in a certain proportion. Now they claim that God is not necessary to account for the world, and the values are foolish aberrations. Now God is another transcendental entity. We cannot perceive God. We just infer God because of different things, right? So in philosophy of religion, you will learn about proofs for God. There are various proofs for God. One of them is teleological proof. What is teleological proof? So if you see around yourself, if you see around the world, there is so much order, so much harmony in this world. Like sun rises in the east, sets in the west, and it has been happening since ages. So there is so much order and harmony. From this, we can infer that there must be someone who has brought about so much order and harmony in this world, and that entity is considered to be God. This is very simplistic account of teleological proof of God, which we will read in detail in philosophy of religion. Similarly, there is a moral proof of God as well. So all I'm trying to say is God is also an inferred entity. God is not something which is perceived, and hence, in consonance with their epistemology, the Charvaka school rejects God. There are no gods. Then we come to values. Again, values, your moral values are not something which you can perceive, right? And hence they also reject moral values. They also reject theory of karma because they cannot perceive anything like karma. And values in Indian society are also intricately linked with theory of karma. Indian ethics is based on theory of karma, so they reject all of that as well. And it is all coming from their epistemology only. Now, these lines are not important. You can read them. It's just given that there were four different kinds of materialistic schools. It's not important. Then all the schools agree. Yeah, so there are four schools and they give different kind of explanation to what soul actually is. But the main crux of the matter is that soul is a product of matter. That is, they all are materialistic in their metaphysics. Shantarakshita says that materialist Kamla Shutara maintains the view that consciousness arises out of material body associated with vital bits. So this also is not important. This is view of some particular materialist about from where consciousness arises. Okay. So yeah, there are some terms which I want to introduce you to: naturalism or Swabhavvad. So as you have seen that they say that there are four elements, and because of combination of these four elements, different kind of things arise. Like if they combine in a certain proportion, consciousness will arise. But you might ask, what gives motion to these elements in themselves? Why will they combine? Why are these elements not at rest? Why the atoms of these elements are combining randomly? So one explanation for this, as you will see in other school, is given by theory of karma, and a lot and some schools of philosophy in Indian philosophy consider that theory of karma is being monitored by God, while other schools will consider that theory of karma or law of karma is self-sustaining. It doesn't need a God. It is a law in itself, and it works on itself. But what Charvaka school says that no, there is no law of karma because of which the elements or atoms move. Also, there is no God which is supervising the motion of these elements. These elements move because they have this nature only. By it is in their nature to move and combine and to collide and combine in different proportions. This is known as Subhavvad or naturalism. And then there is a term called Dehatmavad. What Dehatmavad means is simply that they have the notion of consciousness for them is that consciousness is just present is derived from matter only, and we just have a conscious living body and we don't have any soul. So this is their metaphysical theory of soul, which is soul is deha is nothing but body and atma is nothing but soul. So they say that atma is nothing but body. It is conscious living body. Okay, so I believe that these terms naturalism and dehatmavad are understood by now. Now you will see a lot of contradictions in the Charvaka school. Again, how do they come about with this naturalistic view? How did they come about with that elements in themselves by their nature combine and form different kind of things? They couldn't perceive this, right? So they just inferred it or they just theorized it, and hence they are going against their own epistemology. Thus, there are a lot of contradiction in Charvaka school, which we have already seen. Okay, so now this whole page is devoted to This whole page is criticism of different Indian schools which consider consciousness to be an aspect of reality against the materialist metaphysics of Charvak school. So you might be thinking about this, that what is the need for including soul or consciousness in your ontology? I have given a very simple argument till now that if a person dies, then other people in ancient times must have seen that the body remains, but something, their ability to be aware of their surrounding, goes away at the very instant that they die. So that must have been the basis of distinction between soul and body. And the essence of soul is consciousness. But now let's look at this argument in a bit detail so that we can get a holistic understanding of what consciousness is and why, even till date, sciences have not been able to explain consciousness fully. Okay, so I will like to, yeah, first I will like to point out that whatever I will tell you in this page, that is not in syllabus. This is just for you to get a background on what the problems relating consciousness are, and that you can gain an interest regarding consciousness. So my basic thing is that whenever you read some kind of problems in philosophy, you might feel, because we have so many preconceived notions, right? We have a common sense based on our scientific understanding of the world today. And with regards to that understanding, we might sometimes feel that certain problems of philosophy are not problems at all, that they are just superfluous, and then we think that why we are reading this subject at all, these problems are not worth it. But my thing is that I want to show you that the problems in philosophy are real problems, and especially the problem of consciousness is a very real problem, and even scientists are today dealing with this in detail, because no solution till now, no coherent solution has been arrived at till now. Okay, so first I will like you to understand what consciousness is. So consciousness, till now we have understood that it is our ability to be aware of our surroundings. We have also seen that humans have an extra aspect of consciousness, which is self-consciousness, which is we are aware that we have awareness, right? It is one level above the consciousness of other animals. I mean, at least this is what different philosophers and in Indian philosophy as well, people have considered. Of course, the consciousness of humans and animals is not so clearly demarcated. There is a gradual gradation. Humans have the highest level of consciousness. Then a dog will maybe have lesser level. A crocodile may have even lesser level. Then we might have something like ant, which will have even lesser level. Then we might have plants, which might have even lesser level of consciousness, right? So it's not that clearly demarcated, but that is the view of Indian schools of philosophy. Yes. So one very intuitive way of understanding about consciousness is that it is our subjective experience. So it is like a film running at the back of our head. This is self consciousness. So at every time there is some kind of film running in our head, inside our head. That is what is consciousness is. And that is what is not being explained by science. Okay, so first let's try to look at it from an evolutionary perspective. So Darwin gave his theory of evolution. This is theory of evolution is one of the most tested and time tested kind of theory. It is now considered almost a fact by biologists. So you understand the difference between theory and fact, right? So what is the difference between fact and theory? When Darwin first proposed his theory, he came about some kind of explanations for there to be evolution, and from those evidences and explanation, he proposed a hypothesis. Hence, it was not a fact, it was just a theory, it was just a hypothesis. But this hypothesis has stood the test of time, and it has predicted things so well that today it is considered that it is almost a fact. Of course, this cannot be logically proved, but just by our empirical investigation, we have found it to be so robust that it is almost considered a fact these days. Okay, so if we consider from evolutionary point of view, life on Earth must have started from a single-celled organism. And today, we humans stand at the top of the chain of organisms which have evolved over time. So you must think that a single-celled organism, you must consider it to be unconscious, right? How can a single-celled organism be conscious? But then you have, or leave that only. Before single-celled organism, there must be only some chemicals out there on Earth from which that organism would have been formed. So there is definitely no consciousness in those chemicals. Then at what point during this cycle of evolution did consciousness arise in living beings? That is the problem of consciousness. So if we try to think of it, So theory of evolution talks about natural selection. So there must have, let's say, a single-celled organism must have arisen, and there will be, it will be undergoing constant mutation. So there, because of conditions on Earth, a lot of these organisms would be dying because of the environmental conditions around them. But consider, because of some mutation, a specific organism, single-celled organism, developed a kind of chemistry inside it that it started getting attracted to food. So there are some very simple organisms out there which move randomly. So they will move randomly around in any direction, and wherever they found food. Now, how will they detect food? They will detect food by some kind of chemical reaction, right? So they will detect food, and as soon as they detect food, they slow down, right? So whatever slows down in them, their metabolism slows down or anything. So in this way, they make it more likely that they will spend more time in areas with foods. Thus, this kind of mutation will give such an organism an advantage over other organisms. So while other organisms will be killed by harsh environmental condition, this organism will breed and will multiply much faster and will prevail. And we can understand that this is how slowly and steadily evolution happened on Earth, right? But can we say that this organism was conscious? No, I don't think so. Why was it not conscious in the sense that humans are conscious? Because there was no kind of film going on in its mind. It was just responding to some chemicals, and it was chemical reactions which were driving it, right? So there was such kind of chemical reactions driving it. Then we can even say that some higher organisms might have been formed. But what exact point was there? What first organism was there which exhibited consciousness? By consciousness, I mean that it was aware of its existence, that it was aware that there is a film going on inside their head, that they had subjective experience, right? So that is what is difficult to explain. Okay, so now I will like to share with you the view of eminent philosopher David Chalmers and his view on consciousness. So he is the one who first of all coined the term of hard problem of consciousness. So he gave two, yeah. So he came about with the hard problem of consciousness, and he said that consciousness cannot be explained by whatever physics we have right now. We have in physics we have certain particles, we have matter, we have energy, and certain particles in matter. And he claimed that we cannot explain consciousness by those by current physics, and we will need to have some new ideas to be able to explain consciousness. So what is the theory of consciousness according to him? So he said that psychological phenomena like learning, reasoning, and remembering can all be explained in terms of playing some functional role, right? So consider when you are learning something, what you are doing is you are looking at something, and maybe say you are remembering things. So you are looking at something and you are remembering things. Can science explain this? Yes, science can explain this in certain way. What they can do is they can take an MRI scan or some kind of electromagnetic scan of your brain. You know that brain has neurons, right? And neurons transmit information using electrical signals. This is our modern scientific knowledge. So when we are learning, some neurons might be working more than others. And using scans, scientists can kind of clearly see what neurons are working during a particular functional role. And hence they can kind of explain that during learning what kind of neurons are working, during sleeping what kind of neurons are working, during dreaming what kinds of neurons are working. So all this can be explained using science to a considerable extent, and if it is not explained right now, in future we can expect that it will be explainable pretty well. This, according to David Chalmers, is the easy problem of consciousness because it can be explained by science. Then he distinguishes this easy problem of consciousness with hard problem of consciousness. Now what is that hard problem? It can be simplified in this one single line. Why is the performance of these functions accompanied by experience? So we could have just been zombies, we could have just been robots, right? If For example, like the single-celled organism we talked about here, which slowed down as soon as it saw food, we should also have been just some kind of zombies who were naturally attracted to their food and without any kind of subjective experience, without any kind of film going on inside their head. They would just be attracted to their food and they will eat that and they will reproduce and they will continue their progeny. Hard problem is that how did this experience, the film that goes on inside our head, how did that originate? Now, this, according to David Chalmers, cannot be explained by the current physics we have right now. And you understand, right, that the physics is the basis of all other sciences. So, at the base, we have physics, which talks about basic particles and fundamental laws. From physics, we form chemistry, and from physics and chemistry, we form our biology. And then other aspects of other subjects like psychology and neurobiology, which, okay, neurobiology I think will be here. All these subjects depend, after all, on basic laws of physics, which directly deals with reality in its most fundamental level, right? So what he says that according to our current laws of physics, which has a bearing on our current understanding of neurobiology, we cannot explain subjective experience, the film that is going on in our head. That is the hard problem of consciousness. We can explain that when we learn what kind of neurons are active and what kind of connections are happening in our brain. We can explain all that. But can we explain the film that is going on? That, according to him, is not possible. Right? So, like that, I came across three different kind of views. Now, this is not academic. This is just something I looked at from different videos of YouTube. So, this is just to generate your interest in this problem. Don't try to write anything like this in your papers. So first view is that consciousness cannot be explained materially. This is the view of David Chalmers, as I have discussed, that he considers that the hard problem of consciousness cannot be solved by science in its present form. And we have to, according to him, like during one time, if you know about Maxwell's laws, so because some of the phenomena were not being explained by just Newton's laws, Maxwell came about with new laws, laws of electromagnetism, using which we started to explain a lot of things. Similarly, he thinks that there will be some particle which is associated with consciousness, and after the discovery of that, we will be able to explain consciousness, right? So he considers that currently, whatever material we have, basic particles we have, from that we cannot explain consciousness, and he subscribe to a view of panpsychism. What panpsychism means is that whatever basic particles we have, they also consider some kind of particle related to consciousness. So, like we have atoms, he thinks that similarly we would have some kind of conscious atoms as well. This is his view of how we can explain consciousness. Then there is another view, which is followed by philosopher John Searle, that consciousness can be explained materially, but he rejects integrated information theory of consciousness. And for this, he gives Chinese room thought experiment. I will not go into the detail. This you can find a lot of videos on YouTube and you can look at it if you find it interesting. What rejection of integrated information theory means is that AI, the, the people who predict that AI will someday become conscious like us humans, that thing he rejects, John Searle. According to him, AI cannot become conscious like humans because of some basic fundamental issues he points out, and that he does using his Chinese room thought experiment. Just look at this if you have interest in the problem of consciousness. It is very good, actually, the argument of Chinese room. And the third view is that everything can be explained materially, consciousness can be explained materially, and they also subscribe to the view that integrated information theory is something which can explain consciousness, and according to this view, AI will also someday become consciousness, become conscious. So you can look at these views by yourself. I just wanted to give you some kind of primer so that you can gain interest in this problem, and you can get understanding of why it is an issue in the first place. Because if you go out with your presuppositions, with your common sense knowledge, you might think that this is a non-issue, and that is when you will start feeling that philosophy is superfluous and it is unworthy to study. To study. All right, now let's come to this page. This page will deal specifically with how different schools of Indian philosophy rejected Charvaka's view, and they debated that consciousness is a fundamental aspect of reality. So severe and contemptuous criticisms have been leveled against this doctrine by all schools of Indian philosophy. If consciousness means self-consciousness, as it means in the human beings, then it cannot be identified with living body. Why so? It is because the animals also possess the living body, but not rational consciousness. So what the argument they give is that animals also have living body like us, and if consciousness is just a product of living body, then animals should also have consciousness at the level that humans have. But this argument is easily refuted by Charvakas by saying that only when elements combine in a particular combination, in particular proportion, does the consciousness of humans arise. So they just say that in animals the proportion is different, and hence their consciousness is not at the level of consciousness of humans. Then they then they say that for human body, not all kind of bodies, but human body, consciousness is always associated together with it. So this coexistence of human body and consciousness, arguments are given that this is wrong. What kind of arguments are those? So they say that if consciousness is an essential property of the human body, it should be inseparable from it, as the Charvakas claim. But it is not. In swoons, fits, epilepsy, dreamless sleep, etc., the living body is seen without consciousness. So they say that Charvakas claim that human body is what has the consciousness. But if that is so, if human body is permanently associated with consciousness, then what about dreamless sleep? What about epilepsy? During these states, we do not have consciousness. We are not aware of our surroundings. How can you explain this? Right? So they have a valid question. In our current understanding, we can explain these kind of things, and as I have uh, already discussed, that these will form the easy problem of consciousness as discussed by David Chalmers. We will be able to explain that during swoons or epilepsy or dreamless sleep, what kind of neurons are not functioning, and because of which we do not have that aspect of consciousness during these periods of time. But at that point of time, because we didn't have any conception of brain, any conception of neurons, so this might have been a very logical and valid point. And on the other hand, in dreams, consciousness is seen without the living body. When a dreamer awakes, he disowns the dream body but owns the dream consciousness. The dream objects are sublated in the waking life, but the dream consciousness is not contradicted even in the waking life. I think this is self explanatory. All they are trying to show is that human body and consciousness are not linked together always. There are times when human consciousness and human body exist independently. Now, you might be thinking that, okay, this thing that when we are dreaming, we do not have a body, but we have a consciousness. This is wrong because we have a body existing in world. It's just that during sleep, whatever happens in our head, right? But that is a new notion. Try to think from their perspective that when they would have been undergoing some kind of dreams, whatever they look around them would seem to them real, and it would seem to them like they are transported to some different place. They might not have come to this conclusion in the starting, that dream is something which is happening within our body, that is happening within our brain. They must have thought that they are transported to some other place. So that is why they bring up this thing that consciousness has been separated from the body. Similarly, when a person gets up after seeing a tiger in a dream, he realizes that the tiger is unreal, being only a dream tiger. But the fact that he saw a tiger in a dream remains a fact even in the waking life. This proves that consciousness persists through the three stages of waking life, dream life, and deep sleep life, and is much superior to material body, which is the instrument and not its cause. So here they give an argument to to put forward the primacy of consciousness over material aspect, right? Because even in our waking life, we have consciousness. In waking life, we also have material body. In dream life, we have consciousness, but we do not have a material body. Whereas in deep sleep life, we do not have consciousness, we neither have material body, but our consciousness persists, right? Because even if we go to deep sleep, after we get awake again, we remember things which we did the last day. So, all through these three stages of our life, through our life cycle, consciousness persists, but in these two things, dream life and deep sleep life, material body does not persist. Again, they do not have any conception of brain at that point of time, that things are happening inside their body, that inside their brain. So they consider that consciousness persists, but material body does not persist, and hence it is not the primary aspect, but consciousness is the primary aspect. This primacy aspect will be given by schools like Advaita Vedanta and Vigyanvad. Okay, then and other arguments are, moreover, the subject, the knower, cannot be reduced to the object, the known, since all objects presuppose the existence of the subject. Now, this again is Advaita Vedanta viewpoint of metaphysics, right? We saw that in Advaita Vedanta, pure consciousness or Brahm is the only reality, and that is what exists only, and everything else, all the objects and everything, presuppose the existence of this pure subject. So this argument is from the perspective of the metaphysics of Advaita Vedanta. But okay, you can think of this, and I will give you an alternative perspective that there of Charvaka school, that there are only some material things or matter, and because of certain combination of these matters, consciousness arises. So objective things were present in the world from starting, and subject arises from the object, right? So you can argue from both the sides. It's just that Advaita Vedanta prefers this kind of view, and they have given certain arguments for this, whereas Charvaka prefers the other view, and they have given certain arguments for that. Again, the subject is the enjoyer and object is enjoyed, and the two cannot be identified. Again, this is the viewpoint of mm Advaita Vedanta and other spiritualistic schools of Indian philosophy. Again, the mere fact that consciousness is not experienced without the material body is no argument to prove that it is a mere product of matter. So this argument had been given by Charvak, right? That human body and consciousness always coexist. So what they are saying is that just because they coexist does not imply that the cause of consciousness is matter itself. Coexistence does not imply causation. Coexistence is not causation, they are different things. One more example is two horns of a bull which are always found together cannot be regarded as causally related. They are just coexisting. They are present at the same time in space, in nearby space. They just exist together. It's not that because they exist together, one thing will be caused by other. That is not a valid inference. Moreover, if consciousness is a property of body, it must be perceived like other material properties, but it is neither smelt, nor tasted, nor seen, nor touched, nor heard. Right? So this problem still persists if we look at the hard problem of consciousness, that what leads to a subjective experience, the film that is going on in our brain, what causes that? How can physical entities cause that? That is even not explained now, right? So same viewpoint these schools of Indian philosophy are also putting forward. Again, if consciousness is a property of the body, then there should be no consciousness of the body. For why should the body, qualified to produce consciousness, itself stand in need of being manifested by consciousness? Now, this again, they are talking from the viewpoint of Advaita metaphysics. They're saying that if consciousness is property of body, as Charvak said, then there should be no consciousness of the body. Yeah, because the basic thing, the primary thing is body, and from body, consciousness arises. So consciousness presupposes body, right? So as consciousness presupposes body, you cannot talk about consciousness of the body because consciousness itself presupposes body, right? This will be circular thing, as you have seen in the fallacy of Petito Principi before. Hence, if body is something primary, you cannot be talking about body in terms of consciousness. You should understand that what is primary and what is something which is derived from it. Further, if it is a property of matter, then like other material properties, it should be known by all in the same manner and should not be private. Again, this also is comprised by in the hard problem of consciousness, that why that subjective experience, that film in the head, how can that be explained by matter? But we find that consciousness is intimately private, and consciousness of an individual cannot be shared by others. Again, if the existence of the soul surviving death cannot be demonstrated, its non existence too cannot be demonstrated. Now, this last line, if you see the Charvak viewpoint, is that soul does not survive death because they follow the notion of Deha Atmavan, which means that soul is identified with the conscious living body. And they say that as we cannot perceive any soul which survives death. Hence, their viewpoint was that soul is associated with material body only, and it is not something different. But now, the other schools of Indian philosophy will say that you cannot demonstrate that soul survives. You cannot demonstrate soul's existence, but you cannot also describe its non-existence, right? So, according to if Charvaka have to be self-consistent with their epistemology of considering perception is as the only valid means of knowledge, then they should remain agnostic to the existence of soul. By agnostic means they believe both the things, that both the things are possible and they don't know the answer. That existence of the soul as a separate metaphysical entity and even non-existence of the soul as a separate metaphysical entity is possible. They cannot perceive the existence as well as non-existence. Have they perceived the non-existence of the soul? No. It might be the case that soul might be existing somewhere. It's just that they are not able to see it. That might also be the case. So at best, Charvakas can be agnostic about all the metaphysical entities like God and like soul, and they cannot for sure say that because we cannot demonstrate it, because we cannot perceive it, they do not exist. Okay, so we are done with metaphysics. In the next lecture, we will see ethics. This is not in syllabus, but it is good to read it once to get a holistic understanding of the chapter, and it is only one page after all. So we will do it, and after that we will start looking at the PYQs. And you will see that I promise you that all the PYQs asked in the past 10 years, everything you will be able to answer from whatever you have studied till now. Okay, so see you then in the next video.